Please.
But can you swear on the podcast?
Yeah, you have
Can,
to. You have
can
to.
you do a beep in the podcast? I would appreciate that. But he said 50% of all is all.
Hey Robin, thank you for accepting the invite and welcome to A Glass of Marketing with Joe. The format is pretty simple. We're gonna have a glass of wine while talking about marketing, of course, personal and professional growth. But before getting started, what are you drinking today?
Hey, good to see you, Gio. I am having a Malbec. This is a step up from the one I normally have, which is I often have the Trivento Malbec, but this is like special reserve, which I've picked out just for you today, Joe.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I mean, Reserva means that it's been aging for a little bit more time. Cheers, by the way, and thank you for accepting it. Yeah, so Malbec, by the way, is one of the most famous grapes from Argentina. It's a very dark and strong wine, so I feel you can actually taste a little bit of blackberry, plums, and chocolate. Usually they are very close to chocolate as well. It's a very good wine. I would say it's very intense. It's more like, if you're eating meat, it's more like for heavy plates. But I mean, I love it.
Is that a way of
and
you saying I'm going to get drunk by the end of this?
Yeah, indeed. I was gonna say, be careful, go slow, because we're gonna get until the end, But I mean, it's fine because at the end we talk about life. So, the more you drink, the better it is, right? But yeah, I mean, very cool choice, mate. And because it's been aging, you might also taste and smell a little bit of vanilla, because usually vanilla comes from the wood. I'm drinking a glass of Franciacorta. So Franciacorta is actually an Italian champagne.
Cheers.
By the way, yeah. So Robin, for people who don't know you the editor at Performance Marketing World. Do you want to quickly explain what Performance Marketing World is and what you do?
Yeah, we are the latest media brand from Haymarket. We have our stablemates, our Campaign and PR Week, amongst many others. And we've formed because there is a growing part of marketing that is around performance, which is around focusing around paid search, paid media, anything that's direct. And that's where we are. And it's been an incredible journey. The last 3 years, we've grown incredibly fast. And Joe, you've seen what we've been doing. We've been doing live shows. We've been at the Excel. We've been at the Business Design Center. And it's kind of verified our decision to launch this magazine because performance is becoming such an essential part of marketing. I've noticed you've picked up on that yourself.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I feel like, I mean, today we still call it digital marketing, performance marketing, but I feel like it's not really performance marketing anymore. It's just marketing. I think marketing evolved, right? And with technology as well. So it's just a matter of doing marketing in a new world, essentially, right? Because we got new medias, we got new platforms, and it's good that we got, platforms like you guys, because I feel like, of course, you need to learn and keep studying conferences and events where industry leaders can actually meet and discuss and talk about it. So this is also the aim of this channel, right? Is actually having like food for thoughts, right? Having provocative discussions, and it's not just about the latest. It's also about the different point of views, right? Everyone has theirs, right? So the first thing I really wanted to ask you is like, what does an editor and specifically like a journalist do?
Well, there are two sort of parts of the same profession. I'll start with a journalist, if that makes sense. I did a little bit of research for you, Joe, and I looked up the actual meaning of a journalist. And I found out that journalist comes from the old French journal or journal, which is day or day's work, and that became journal, and that became daily publication. And I think that's the point. It's making a record of what's happened that day. And that's the thing. And throughout history, there have been journals, and that's where we've learned about history. People witnessing things and then writing them down, and that's still around today in that respect. But the thing is, we're in the information age. Now, this is the age of information. There's an abundance of information out there. And an interesting fact that I think that the stats changed slightly, but it's uh, the last 2 years of data, there's been more data than throughout all of human history put together. And that's from stone tablets and from cave drawings through to parchments and everything else. So there's an absolute abundance of data. There's been an explosion since the internet. But there's still been a thirst for journalism and quality, making a record of the day, being independent. And from that, you can have a lofty, you can talk about journalism in a lofty way. You can say you're a source of truth. We watch The Watchmen and things like that. But also within B2B journalism, there's a slightly less lofty ambition, but that is also very important, which is the Nationals report on all the big breaking business news, but we champion smaller parts of industries, and we become a focal point for those, and we celebrate and share what's happening within those industries, and they're not necessarily covered in the national papers and things like that. And that's one of the essential parts of what we do. And then as an editor, I kind of describe what I do really as being an air traffic controller, because there's so much coming in. There's this ridiculous amounts of stuff coming in every day. And the point is to try and make sense of it all and turn it into something that has an agenda, that makes sense for our readers. And it's really, I think every day I try and come in thinking, these are busy people that I'm writing for, and I'm taking the time so that they don't have to make sense of their world, and it makes it a little bit easier for them.
So it's like the editor is like the art director of a journalist, or
in that respect, yeah, I think it's
okay.
just taking that slightly bigger picture and making sense of everything, and it's trying to make sure that you can be you can put everything into a nice package. I almost say we put out a magazine every day. We have
Okay.
a bit of everything, a bit of data, a bit of news, a bit of thought provocation, that kind
So
of thing.
let's say beside the writing, you put a little bit of marketing as well, right? You need to understand what people would like to read, so you kind of give a direction there, right? It's pretty interesting. I mean, when I think about journalists and when I think about news, and of course, in this case is specifically, news about digital marketing, but can be any news, right? I feel like the big difference between the past today is that in the past you only had a couple of media, and they were giving the news daily. So you needed quantity and quality as well, but mostly quantity, right? Where today in a society where, as you said, we are in the information technology society, there is a lot of quantity of news. First of all, I feel like, right, the role of the journalist really evolved. But at the same time, you need to know how to write a little bit better. What's your take on that? Like, in few words, what do you think is in this industry?
There's quite a few big differences. Number one, a journalist today has to be wearing many hats. In the old days, I kind of laugh when I look at the Hollywood movies. Like, you saw them wearing those funny hats, and they would go out and they'd get a scoop and they'd write it down and they'd file the copy and then it'd go off to the printers. But nowadays, you kind of have to own a bit of all of that, and you kind of become your own distribution network. You become your own printer press as well, because you put things out on social, you distribute the bulletins, you distribute the networks. So I love watching kind of Hollywood movies, and like when Woodward and Bernstein are breaking the Watergate scandal or something. Think, where's the bit when they suddenly have to talk to like 50 PRs about the next awards? A next award show or something like that. We do have to do a lot more in that time, but it also means you kind of own your product a bit more. So we have to. It's a bit like we own the end product as such. Whereas, let's say you're a marketer and you are marketing Cocoa Pops or something. You don't go. You're not in the factory then making the Cocoa Pops at the end. But we do go down and we make them, and we have to. And we also have to do the sort of strategy side as well at the top level. The other major difference, and anyone in a journalism in a press office will probably know this, is that you just don't hear the phones ring as much anymore. It is done a lot more via email. It's done a lot more via video call, and that has helped in terms of the volume of stuff we can produce individually, because it saves a lot of time by just talking via email and making sense of all those things. Whereas it used to be I'd be on the phone all the time, people wanting to talk to me, the office phone would be ringing, and that would take time. And now it's more like we can focus and we can go to who we need to for sources, and that's made a big difference in our profession.
And then, of course, AI just arrived, I mean, a year ago. And I feel like one of the jobs that really, really affected is writing, right? In general. How did it really affect you guys? Because I feel for sure it gave you like the super smart assistant that you were looking for, and you don't have to pay for it. So it's super cool. Like you can just them. So probably we will have more editors and less journalists in some ways. But like, how do you think it really affected you guys in a broader
Um,
aspect?
we're still figuring it out. At Haymarket, we have a steering group for this kind of thing where we're talking about how we apply AI to the content we're producing. The main thing we've come to as a conclusion is we still need human input in, human input out, but AI can help in the middle bit. And that is a lot of where we are. We can sort of write some copy, but if we need something, if we need that copy rewritten, say for a social post or something, we can use something like ChatGPT to suggest that, and it could just save us a lot of time because we have we have a limited capacity for the time we have each of the piece of content we have. I love one of the things I love about where I work within Haymarket is we have journalists representing all different parts of industries. With Haymarket, we don't just have campaign. We have the wind power team. We have the ends report. We people talk about charities, that kind of thing, and they all have a different take on how they can use AI for their respective audiences. Like we have our automotive team have used Midjourney and the imaging to create a fun little program within their autocar publication where readers can submit what happens if I merge these two cars together, what will it look
Yeah.
like? And it's produced some really ugly looking cars.
Yeah, but I feel like when we're looking at producing content, right? Today with AI, you can produce higher quantity of content. In average, it can also be kind of better quality than the past. So you definitely need less people in terms of like writing, and probably you need more people in terms of like editing and, having more like directors in that way. But at the same time, I feel like at the beginning, if someone was using AI in like in LinkedIn, social media, you couldn't now, since everyone has been using AI. I mean, at least I can definitely tell who is using AI on LinkedIn and on social or like on a website. So I feel like we're getting back to the basics in some ways. Like if everyone is using AI, you can tell who is not using it, and probably the higher quality today is not using it, or at least using it 40%, right? Can you spot the difference? Can you tell when someone is using it or not?
I think you can if you're a seasoned journalist,
Okay.
because I think a lot of the way it writes at the moment, it feels like if you're talking to someone, if it's like a student, or it's written that it always has a sort of almost like they're writing an essay, and at the end it goes, in conclusion, this is X, Y, Z,
I
and
see.
so it's this fairly formulaic. I think with with human input, you can sort of see that that sort of messy creativity is the differentiator, and you can make these strange connections. Like when I write a column, I always kind of I look at what I've seen in an event or something like that, and I'll make a weird connection in my head that'll tell a good narrative. And I don't think when I would use something like ChatGPT, it would do that. Like when I was in Cannes, I was running down the beach on the Croisette and trying to meet my next person, and I saw all the different beaches with Google Beach, Spotify Beach, Microsoft Beach, Meta Beach, and you could only get into each of those by putting in your having special access. And I was about to talk to someone about walled gardens within the internet, and I thought, well, this is the perfect metaphor. Cannes has created it very clumsily. They're literally walled beaches that you can only get into with access and things like that. And I was talking to someone about breaking these walled gardens, and I realized, don't they realize that's kind of what it looks like? And I felt like only at this stage with AI, I think you can still value that level of creativity, those little spark moments that you can only really get through human experience and understanding how other humans would interpret that. That said, I think a few years down the line, I'm very curious as to how much further it can go in developing that and being smart.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I feel, I mean, I can tell the difference just because, as you said, there are some forms that you can recognize, like at the end, in conclusion, or like, there are some phrases you can tell it's been AI, but then for basic usage, right? But then I can tell, like, for example, if you put two articles together and you ask AI, look, write an article out of these two articles, then it's pretty hard to tell. Or if you already write something yourself and you ask AI, can you improve it? It's very hard to tell. And this has just been like a year. Think like
Yeah.
in 5 to 10 years. So definitely, as I said in another episodes, it will be pretty hard to tell, if not impossible. If not, it would be much better to just read things from AI, right? But like, on one side, we have the production, right? Which is AI, it's just arrived. Even before AI, I've been using Grammarly because I'm not a native speaker, so I've been
Yeah.
using AI since the beginning, right? On the other side, beside production, then you have consumption. And if you think about it, we moved from big newspapers, like actually paper, which I look at it today and it feels pretty weird. And then you move to iPad, right? Where at least it's easier, right? But still same content in some ways. Then you go to mobile, and which at the same time you got websites, which of course are shorter than pages, where you also have images, you have videos. But then we also moved to catchy lines that they want you to click, and clickbaits, and then you go to videos and TikTok. So today we are in a place where TikTok, I was reading like an article the other day, and it says that the new generation is actually the first one that is getting most of the information through TikTok. So if you think
Yeah.
about it, I mean, my real question here is people still reading newspaper, or like the new generation, if they want to know what happened today, they just like watching like a 15-second video from TikTok.
That's a good question. I mean, at Unlocked event that you were at as well, Joe, and you did a very, very good job there, by the way. We had a Gen Z panel where that question was asked. Is TikTok the de facto search engine for Gen Z? And is that where they're going for information? And the answer was from someone on the Gen Z panel was, yeah, I don't really think of Google or a news site as a place to go to for that kind of content. Um, the answer we've had from the sort of traditional media press fourth estate world is to go on those channels and to be there as well, and to offer independent, a level of expertise, a layer that you don't get with bloggers, you don't necessarily get with influencers, and the contacts and the obligations we have as journalists that influencers and bloggers don't necessarily have. And we can bring that to somewhere like TikTok, we can bring that to Instagram. We have those pages. We did an Instagram live talking about influencers that got thousands and thousands of views, with a Love Island star of all people, and that went really well. So the answer for a lot of journalists is to go onto those platforms. And as you know, X, Twitter is a place for news, and a lot of the big papers and stuff will exist there
But like
use those
I
spaces.
get you need to translate it, right? I do the same with this channel, right? Like I have like a long form on YouTube, and then I translate it in like 30 seconds on social, because I know people are able to go through it quickly, and I feel like people don't really want to spend too much time anymore. Also because we have too much information, so you need to make a choice, right? But like I feel like at the same time, taking the time to go through like a page sometimes allows you to better analyze it, to think about it, where even like a simple news, right? Where today I think there are two things, right? First of all, we have so much information that even if you look at news coming from, I don't know, like war, right? Because you see so many images, so many bad images about a war, if in the past they will actually affect you, because you're like, look, oh, there is a war, this is so bad, right? Where today you're just normally scrolling and you see so many images about war that at some point you get used to it. Of course, consumption is much easier, so people attention span is very low, and I think the journalist, like the content producer role really changed. You need to get people attention, but the other side, I feel like it's very hard to grab people attention because they already seen it many times, so it's hard to make them remember it and actually having an impact on that, right?
Yeah, the world is changing, and in terms of people can be getting a bit desensitized to some of the stuff that we're seeing live streamed wars now. I remember back in 2000 and well, back in 2003, but it was the first sort of televised wars, and now we're getting live streamed wars that aren't happening without that media intermediary. It's happening very much raw. It's happening and there's no control over it. And we noticed that with TikTok, there's a lot of stuff happening there where it's not coming from any sort of media source, it's coming direct from the source. The way that's changing for media companies to compete with it is that often they, again, are part of that. They wrap it up at the end and they put it into context and a larger context, and people will still go. You'll notice a lot of news sites source their stories from social media now. You can literally see, oh, that was from a Reddit thread, that was from a Twitter post, and they'll be the main sources for their news as much as it were going to politicians or something or going out into the field. They'll be taking them from live reports.
How do you keep people attention? Because I mean, you talk about digital marketing, so of course it's a niche, right? But how do you find the content that people are interested in, and how do you keep their attention? Is there any specific format? I realize that, for example, people really like infographics or like images. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, number one, how do we keep people's attention? We're like marketers. We're very much have the same thing. We're very data driven nowadays, and most journalists are. We do worship at the altar of the dashboard as much as marketers do. We have specific KPIs about engagement, and for us, and not too much of a trade secret, but to put it simply, we want people to keep returning. A reader for me is someone that keeps coming back. I'd rather someone came back regularly once a week to check out PMW because they should. It's full of loads of great content. Rather than just like gorge on us for one day and then forget about us. So the idea is to keep people hooking them in, and we use data to inform us. At the moment, our data is telling us the marketing industry is going crazy for cookies. They're going crazy for marketing mix modeling because if I say those words, dashboards will go absolutely light up. We are, as journalists, are kind of sick of talking about cookies, and we thought the marketing world was sick of talking. 3 years ago, Google talked about this, and we thought, oh, they'll be sick. But actually, what we found is everyone's kind of gone, yeah. Well, we've been banging on about it for 2 years, and in our data suddenly said a lot of brand marketing teams have suddenly woken up. A lot of the board, the CEOs and executives suddenly go, oh, hang on, what's going on? And now they're checking out our website and trying to find out more about cookie deprecation, privacy sandbox, retail media, new identifiers, all that stuff. So that's what we're shifting our content into. But in terms of being interesting, I can tell you more about that if you're interested. But what we do is, if you look at PMW, we've kind of launched a media brand in the post-COVID TikTok era, and we've kind of made it for the Netflix generation. So if you see, you've got scrollers that look a lot like Netflix, and we're heavily on images, on infographics. I know one of your previous guests, Dan, was a cartoonist, and he was talking beautifully about how images and visuals can really help demonstrate complex problems. And we've done the same sort of thing.
Exactly. And as a reader, I feel like what really interests me is finding content that can actually help me on my daily professional life. So like interesting, like I'm a big fan of like graphs. I mean, drawing. This is why also. Is it more like about the quantity or the quality as well? Because like I feel like, of course, quantity is important because it's about reach, it's about impressions, right? But then quality is important because it's about engagement. How do you find the trade-off?
It depends on how large you are as a media organization. Because if you're an established, say, a sports site, you can put out the sports results, the football results, the rugby, the tennis, and you'll be that destination no matter what. You know people are going to come to you because you're the one, you're the BBC Sport or whatever, and you can factually put that. If you're a startup like us, you need to be going more into the niche high quality world because they're going to be going to larger places for those more sort of factual things. But what we do is go deeper. We have, like you said, Joe, like expert analysis. Um, we do some great charts. I just did one today. I was talking to one of my journalists, and we had one hidden in an article. There was like what market 7 things marketers are looking for when they're looking to retain customers and the kind of language they use, things listed as a percentage of what they were relying on. And that was gold dust. I thought, actually, let's make that the story. Simply like people will want to see that. Like, oh, actually, I've been given this job. I need to retain customers. Let's see what are the 7 different things other people are looking at the moment. What are the tricks they're using? And that's where we're coming at. It is more we kind of have to make sure we work a bit more smarter with our content, and that's what you have to do when you're a smaller brand. And we're
Yeah, and
finding that's really responding well to that.
it's interesting, and as you say, data really plays a big part. Because if you think about it, in the past, you will just print, news, will, deliver, and then you will kind of understand how you're selling. Where today you got data, you actually know how much time people spend on each article, if not on each word as well, right? If
Yes.
you want to. So you got heat maps and everything. So it's pretty interesting how you can do like data-driven, journalism as well, right?
I love bits of advice and I love nuggets of information, but I'm terrible at like remembering. It's a bit like when I'm bad, and the same with jokes. Someone will tell me a joke and it'll be really funny, and I can never remember them.
It's
The
good,
only
yeah.
ones of jokes I can remember are the rudest ones, and then I can never repeat them. And that's exactly what's happened when you asked me what's a good piece of advice, and I could only remember the one of my first editors said, which is very rude. And
Please, please.
but can you swear on the podcast?
Yeah,
Can
you
actually
have to. You have
can
to.
you do a beep in the podcast? I would appreciate that. But he said 50% of fool is fool. And I like that. I like that thing because it made you think. And I didn't know quite what he meant by that, but he meant that for data journalism, which is what we're talking about just now, the context of what you're writing about really matters, and particularly when you're communicating to an audience and a community, you have that responsibility. You can't just say this has risen or the ad industry has spent this much on X. You've really got to try and find the proper context in which that is, and how does that compare to other things, and is it not affecting? Is it affected by other aspects of further down the line, that kind of thing? How does it compare to last year, this year? So you've got to be very careful when you report on data journalism. And I always remember him, I imagine him standing over my shoulder
Oh my God.
telling me that kind of thing. I'm sorry for swearing on your show, but I couldn't think of anything else. The only
Easy.
other one I got, I did think of it was, and applies to anyone in the media and when you're reporting on something, it's just 2 words and it distilled it down to so what? And when you write about something, you've always got to ask yourself before you push publish or whatever. So what? Why does this matter? And you can't just say someone has launched this. There you go. We owe more to our readers than that.
It's super cool. I mean, I agree with it because even when my job, so I got like a post-campaign analysis. We just run a campaign. The agency comes back to me, and the first question I ask is usually, "So what?" Right? So
Yes.
you tell me, "We got this, we got that. This performs pretty well. This didn't. So yeah, so what?" So I feel like the secret, I mean, at least my job as well, is that then thinking about not just the next step, but thinking about the next step of the next step of the next step. This news. If you do, then be ready to take those 3 steps as well. And then like getting into your philosophy, like what's your philosophy of life? Like how do you handle stress? How,
How do
how do you survive in this jungle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's traditionally quite a stressful job being a journalist because it's time-based, the news doesn't take a holiday and stuff. So sometimes I'm emailing someone
This
on
is a nice one. News
this.
don't take
Oh,
holidays.
that's
This
one
is
of
cool, man.
mine. You can have that one for free, Joe, if you want. That's one of the other one I say is the readers are my boss. They're really pretentious. I don't like saying that. But no, that's
I
But
mean,
actually,
sorry, the reader is your boss. Is usually say like in the hospitality, they say the
yeah,
client is always right, but
yes.
most of people don't agree because sometimes the client doesn't know what they
Oh,
want, so
oh,
they're not
I
right.
worked in I've worked in hospitality. I've done bar work. I've done hotel work, and I know the customer is not always right. But then also the chef is not always right. I get, the chef, and you get caught between the military chefs and then the upset customer.
Honestly,
And
I've been working in a kitchen once. I mean, they fired me after a month. It's a funny story. When I was under 18 actually. My father was like, you need to appreciate the value of money, which makes totally sense. And you need to appreciate the value of hard work and, you need to study harder because I wasn't studying that much. So it was like, they hired me in this kitchen to actually start, helping those people. But of course, I wasn't ready. So they just kept me like cutting bread and washing glasses. I got fired after a month, actually. I wasn't even good in washing glasses. That made me realize I had to study very hard because
do some.
I could.
The only job I ever got fired from was sales, actually. So clearly I should have gone into marketing, not sales. But I was doing cold calls back in the day and selling conservatories to people that had no interest in buying conservatories, and that was a real good example of invasive marketing, where you're just getting people at their worst time, just as they're making dinner and the phone would ring, and it'd be an 18-year-old like me reading from a script, and that was the worst kind of
It's not
marketing. And
easy.
I'm glad that's been sort of phased out, cold calling as such.
Yeah, no, it's not easy, man. But at the same time, I feel like it helps you learn a lot about people perception, how to treat people, how to be treated as well. Like, and they still call me sometimes, on those cold calls. I try to be very nice because I've been in a similar situation. I was like the business developer of this company in Rome, and that was pretty hard because you were calling people pretending, and I was actually B2B, so I was actually calling like CTOs, CEOs. So I was actually experts. You were not just calling
Qualified
normal people.
leads, yeah.
That was very hard. That was very hard, but you learn a lot. The last thing I really wanted to ask you, and as you know, the format now is the last thing I ask everyone is like, what's your definition of success? Like, because everyone talks about success, right? And most of people say success is like making money, is like getting there, which then everyone, like, no one really knows where there is, right? And the other people say is like, like just having the right people around you and loving yourself. I feel like there must be a balance also, right? So what's your definition of success?
Oh yeah, it's a really big question, and I don't know. I can give you the answer that makes me not sound like a selfish a-hole first. Is that okay? Because I did think of one that got told to me when I got made editor, and it did stick with me. And I did think about it. It was like,
Give me two then. Yeah, okay, it's
okay,
fine. Give me two.
it's their success is your success, which is can be in work, and it can also be with your family, it can be with your friends. I think it's finding pleasure in other people's success rather than that whole Schadenfreude world where you find pleasure in other people's failure. Find pleasure in people you work with and support, and feeling that you've succeeded because you've helped them along a way to succeed in that respect. And I think as you grow in your career, or you grow in your life, you end up becoming a mentor. Like, I mean, like you have, Joe, been teaching, and in all sorts of ways, we become mentors to different people, or we become parents. And I think that becomes more and more important, how what we've learned, what we can pass on to other people and help boost them, so they can learn quicker than we did in some respects. So they aren't making mistakes when they're 18 and things like that. So I think that was one that stuck with me quite well.
What's the other one you said
Oh,
you didn't want to
the
say?
second was more like, I think, going back to the wine idea, and you age with fine wine. I think in one of your earlier episodes you said wine can age well or it can age very badly depending on how you nurture it. And I think to age well, I think you've always got to stop yourself going stale, and you've got to always challenge yourself, I think. And that can be all sorts of ways. And if you ever feel like you're in a rut in some way, mentally or physically, I think it's good to just take yourself out of the comfort zone and keep challenging yourself, because that's the way you grow. I'm quite an introvert, and yet I do a job that means I have to be on a stage in front of thousands of people, or do a recording with you, Joe, or something like that. And it's constantly challenging myself. But you also learn what you're made of when you learn your metal. And And are you really, I know, I asked this question of myself, am I really the type of person I think I am? Like, if someone was to fall in the street, would you be the person that helps them? And those kind of things, those little moments where you don't have time, but you're going to be tested. And I think it's always good to just test yourself and think, what kind of person do I think I am? What person am I? And see if you can grow into that person you want to be, I think.
No, I feel like challenging yourself in a good way, which can be simply, as you said, talking in front of many people as an introvert. Talking in front of many people can be very challenging, right? But it's also an exercise. I think what you realize there is that the first time is the hardest, and then over time it gets easier, and then over time gets addictive as well, right? Because it's the adrenaline, it's the energy, it's the simple thing when they say get out of your comfort zone. It's cool. I really like getting out of my comfort zone, but I'm also realizing that with age, sometimes I don't want to get out of my comfort zone. You know what I mean? I'm fine with that. So I feel like the process is getting out your comfort zone slowly
Yeah.
in a way that your comfort zone gets bigger. So at some point you don't need to get out of it anymore,
Yeah.
right? What do you think?
I think that is the beauty of getting older. I think it is testing yourself and then saying, actually, I don't like that thing, or I'm not good at it, that's fine. But I think it's always worth just keeping prodding, seeing what you're made of and stuff. But yeah, there is a beauty to then sort of find it is almost like you're doing that to find where you're best to put your energies and things like that. Absolutely.
I totally agree. And yeah, man, thank you so much for accepting the invite. That was really great. And yeah, cheers to energy, cheers to mentors, and cheers to life, man.
Cheers to
Thank
energy
you.
and aging like fine wine.